Welcome back to another episode of the F Word and Friends. And last time Liani was so good, we decided to keep her for another episode. And today we're discussing a frequently asked question that we get from clients, but also from people around the braai. Should I invest my money offshore? Or should I diversify offshore? Now, as we can see, the world's so small these days, and you don't want to, or you shouldn't just invest in the country you are in South Africa. There's not a lot of opportunities just here. There's multiple opportunities all over the world. So there's different ways, and that's why we broke it up into two parts. Firstly, while you're still a South African investor, keeping it in rands, indirect offshore exposure. And the second part, which will be another episode, is physically taking your money out of the country. PJ, talk to us about the first part, the different ways of getting diversifying to offshore assets.
I think what a lot of people should remember is if you are investing in SA equities on the local stock exchange, you already has got more than 60% offshore exposure. If you just think about our biggest share, Naspers process, biggest holding is Tencent. So you are more influenced by what Chinese kids play TV games there with your stock returns than anything that's happening in South Africa. So it doesn't matter what an EFF or a party do here, their stock performance won't be
be influenced by
yes.
political.
And then resource companies as well. Again, nothing to do with South Africa. We are a very small player. So while we're a small player, all the resource companies, again, got more to do what's happening in the US and what's happening in China. Are they using resources? Another big one, something like British American Tobacco, also dual-listed company. So all those people smoking in India, you also get a benefit from that. So even if you're just invested in the local stock exchange, you already have exposure.
Richmond, we all know Richmond, selling luxury goods mostly in China, and they've done very well. It's nothing to do with South Africa, but there are listed companies in South Africa earning their revenue offshore. Liani, there's another way of diversifying offshore without having to physically take your money out of the country.
So you can actually use a local platform, a local unit trust. And the difference is you're still going to use rands, you can invest in rands, you're going to withdraw in rands. But the difference is they refer to it as feeder funds or asset swaps. The difference with that is you have exposure to offshore assets. But something that is important with that, so the money isn't directly offshore, but something that is important when it comes to that is you have to understand the accessibility, so it's easily accessible. You can have a debit order, you can have a lump sum, and usually the minimums are accessible for the everyday client. So that is stuff that you need to consider, but there are the more hairy stuff that you need to consider. And that is things like the tax side of it. So when it comes to offshore or feeder funds, remember the capital gain calculation. When it comes to calculating that, it includes the unit price appreciation, but it also includes rand appreciation. So usually the capital gain implication might be larger versus taking it directly offshore.
That's directly offshore, but there's no difference in a local, let's say, feeder fund than it is like a local equity fund. You also get that capital gain, it's the same. Absolutely. There's a benefit maybe to take it directly offshore, but in the local side, it's basically the same. You get if you're in a flexible investment, you get the same tax certificates. If you're in a retirement annuity, again, you can have exposure to that, feeder funds.
Yes. So tax, again, when we look at that, is, remember, it's a local product. So the client is going to be taxed on his individual tax profile, so maximum of 45% on income and 18% inclusion rate on the capital gain. You also need to have a look at the estate side of it. So it is local, it is in a unit trust. So with any unit trust, you can't nominate a beneficiary. So that means in the instance of the client passing, that means that is actually going to go to the estate. And what does it mean if it goes to the estate? Executors' fees, estate duty, and so forth. So even though it is incredibly accessible and the minimums are low, there are key considerations that you have to consider when going into an investment like that. But that is something that is, I sort of want to echo the accessibility, because you can access it through any other platform or asset manager. You have that feeder fund access, but just always consider everything else that goes with it, the tax implications, the estate implications, where the complexities lie, and so forth. But it is possible. I think it's just always important to know that you invest in rands, you withdraw in rands.
And that's why you do that as well. So it's easy to get into that. So that's in the flexible investment side, which you're talking about a feeder fund. But you can also in a retirement annuity fund, even like I said, you get indirect exposure in all those companies listed on the JSE. You can also in a retirement funds, pension funds, retirement annuities, preservation funds, have 45% exposure in feeder funds as well.
Regulation 28.
Regulation 28 as well. So now on your portfolio, you can almost have 70% indirect exposure, even in a local retirement.
Yeah, and I think before I give over to Ruben, so let's use Allan Gray Balance Fund, because a lot of people know the Allan Gray Balance Fund. But Allan Gray Balance Fund, what's it currently sitting at? About 35% offshore.
37. Yeah, I think it's
So
more recently updated 39%.
39%. So it's important for people to realize that when they are in most of these balance funds, they have offshore exposure. The easiest way to see it is ask your advisor just for your portfolio analysis, the asset allocation, and there you can see exactly what's percentage is offshore and what percentage is local. But remember, even on the local side, as you mentioned, you also have offshore exposure. So that's something important to remember.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when this conversation comes up and, I want to take money overseas, I need offshore exposure, exactly like PJ said, in terms of the companies itself, earnings come from, or many companies' earnings come from the offshore. But with Regulation 28 and with a multi-asset balanced fund, they are Regulation 28 compliant. So meaning these funds are used in pension funds, so retail pension funds, for clients that have employee benefits at their work. And then obviously for retirement annuities as well. Now, exactly like you said, Regulation 28, 45% is the cap for offshore assets. So many clients, even in the retirement funds, they already have lots of exposure in offshore assets. Although it is denominated in rand, they do already have.
But they are capped in retirement. But if it's a flexible investment, you can put on the MSCI World Tracker 100% of your portfolio, tax-free savings. So there you can have 100% offshore exposure, which brings us now maybe to the next part, which I'll just intro and then we'll cut. Is there anything else you want to say?
Yeah, so I think the pros of why investing directly is, I think the minimums is with 1,000 rand a month, you can have exposure to the whole world. So there's no limits. You don't have to go through Reserve Bank, no tax clearance. It's easy.
Maybe just how easy is it in China? I mean, you can have a Chinese fund, the Red Dragon. Yeah, there's all over the world. It's not just the US or the UK. You can, if you want to, go into the Japan, Australia we mentioned earlier. You can literally invest
anywhere in the world. And the money stays here. And estate planning, that's also important. You don't have to take money. So again, what is your goal? Why do you want to take money offshore? We see a lot of old people coming here and they've only got this few million rand and they have to live from it and then 100% offshore. And it's like, why is everything offshore if you're still going to live here? And then shouldn't it be more conservative or more things? So it's not about taking everything offshore because you think the country is going to burn.
No.
It's what is your planning? What's your consideration? So it's got to stick to the plan. So the right question is actually, it depends is the answer always. It depends what is your goals, and that's how much you should take.
Look, obviously, if we're going to the next point, you need a well-established investment portfolio before thinking of taking money directly overseas. Do you have retirement funds? Do you have emergency funds? And do you actually need cash flow? If your goal is to take money overseas, cash flow should not be something to be thinking about. So it's very, very planning specific. Not for everyone, but the easier way is for everyone. Indirect exposure is anyone can do it.
Yeah, and estate planning, it's in your local world. Anything happens, it's there. So that's why it's important, and we'll in the next episode look at why indirect offshore exposure.
Yeah, I think to wrap it up, to have offshore exposure, fairly easy. Point of interest is quite low, entry. And for most people, that's definitely, starting blocks for a South African citizen. Build up your emergency fund, your portfolio here. And then in our next episode, we'll talk about physically taking money over to another country, doing a currency swap.
Not in a briefcase.
Not physically.
Not physical
Not
cash.
physically, maybe that's it. Yes, but converting into another currency. But we'll have that in part 2. So thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for part 2.